Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining today for just to clarify which meeting you're at, because there've been a lot. This is for the DPCDC reviewer meeting. Okay.
Good morning, everybody. Mahalo for being here. As you all know, and as you all probably have done before, all reviews are online this year. You've seen this site, I think, and I'm not sure if this was up here last year, but they have some very handy links at the bottom to the classifications, the guidelines, and then a dossier library, which was very interesting to sort of click through. But
before we go, is there anyone that has questions about that part or hasn't done that? Okay.
Sorry, Laura, what do you mean hasn't done what?
Hasn't done the electronic reviewer process.
I'm new to this, so I have not done this.
there is a, did you attend Sandra Ueno's session last week for reviewers?
No.
If not, it was taped.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
was been waiting. Yeah, actually, Julie said there was a recording of it. I wasn't able to attend it, but I haven't seen the recording yet. Was that already sent out?
I think Kathy sent it out just the other day.
Okay, I'll check the email. Thank you.
Okay, so we're not really talking about the technical part. We're talking more kind of the philosophy and process. And the guidelines for tenure and promotion, you want to have handy the classification plan, because that is what you're using as your review guide and your standards. This here talks a little bit about who is eligible and ineligible to vote, but this has all been kind of sussed out by the formations of our DPCs and DCs. And just making sure that you definitely want to print and have this classification plan handy so that you can refer to the rank for which they are applying to. So not where they are currently, but where they're applying to. Whoops. Is that the right place?
You have all been part of the process to develop your DPC, scroll way down to the bottom, to develop your procedures, your departmental personnel committee procedures. So every department has their own, and we all kind of started from a template, but you all sort of made different changes. And this was really a result of UPA letting us know that we had been out of compliance for a number of years, and that they were serious when they said department personnel committee procedures and not campus. So I think it was last year or the year before, right? Every department went through the process to develop these. So again, have these very handy so that you can, refer to them when you have questions about process. Especially, I know we've been looking a lot at them as we developed the DPCs. Here's a list of the different DPCs for each department. And on the second tab, we have alternates. By rank 4 and 5s, we've had to insert different people onto the DPCs depending on what rank the applicant was requesting. So, but all that information is here, and that's probably why you guys are here. Okay. So these are just, these were the requirements for DPCs and DCs that you should also review before embarking on this journey with whatever role you're playing.
So I guess one thing that was of note is you do have to make a recommendation of to approve or not approve. You can't just list strengths and weaknesses. So as a DPC, you do have to vote. So this is what we, obviously, and you're all familiar with these documents because you've done them yourselves, but this is what the criteria for tenure is. This is the type of information they include in the dossier. And then obviously the supporting materials that are relevant, that relate to the different sections.
And we wanted to make sure that we showed you what we showed applicants. So this is the exact same slide that we showed applicants, to be clear that, you know, this was the expectations also in the guidelines in parts, right? So we sort of put them all together to make sure that they knew what was expected. And then of course, we gave them a few tips, and probably you guys will be familiar with these because this is probably part of it from what you may have, what we may have discussed in a meeting. So, you know, the idea of state the criteria clearly when they're talking about the classification, you know, make sure it is very clear. You know, we encourage them to do their best not to make the reviewer work too hard and have to figure it out for themselves. Develop a robust educational philosophy. I think over the past couple of years, we've seen a few that weren't as robust as we'd like to see. And because also by the time you're going up for tenure, or if you're going for promotion, right, you've gone through it a couple of times in contract renewal, and it should really be, like we say, robust. It should be substantial. We also ask that they use appropriate institutional program or industry standards. Use citations when appropriate, especially if they're referring to theories, philosophies, standards that, you know, they didn't create themselves. They should use citations. We ask them to know your audience. They are writing for a DPC, a DC, admin, and a TPRC, right? So they should really be thinking about that, and especially the fact that in a TPRC, you know, they might not know. Well, chances are they're not going to know the applicant, right? So we sort of encourage them to make sure that they're thinking in this way. Of course, you know, the rest is pretty basic. Be clear and concise. Focus on work, outcomes, and results. Organize effectively. Use charts and graphs. And of course, check grammar and spelling, because it just gets irritating if you find those little mistakes there.
We had two questions in the chat. Someone's asking is the strengths and weaknesses that you can no longer do this, is this new if they're avoiding giving a negative recommendation? Is it new? For tenure and promotion?
I don't think it's new, but I think through the online system, it is very much being enforced because you're not allowed not to, you know, decide. I think when you wrote a document, you know, when you're writing a letter, you could.
And then Julie's asking, is this true for contract renewal? We can confirm.
I thought that I heard from the system folks that for contract renewal, DPCs could do strengths and weaknesses instead.
I thought so too. So we can get confirmation when that process starts in November. And then another question was, the DPC Google Sheet is not showing it's published. We'll check on the settings. I'm trying to remember who we wanted to make it viewable for. Right now it is viewable to all DCs. So we will.
I'll check.
Yeah, we'll work on that. Any other questions?
Sam has a question. If we're on the DPC, is it possible to be on a TPRC? Another one, not the same one. I guess it's possible. And TPRCs kind of happens at the chancellor's level where they my understanding, but I've never been there, is that they sort of get in a room and they trade cards, you know, with faculty. So I guess it's possible, but I don't think that they, no, actually it's very possible. I was gonna say.
I was gonna say, especially if you're a
It's very
4 or
possible.
5,
Mhm.
it's very possible.
Mhm.
I wanted to jump in about that, especially for another campus. If you're a program person and there aren't enough people of the right rank who are in that program, because the 2 people that come in from another campus are supposed to know that discipline.
Okay.
We thought that we would actually open it up to you folks that are some of the veteran DPC members and then assisting with our new DPC members, maybe just giving some advice or to ask questions or give a little information from your perspective.
So actually, I have a question. So from what I understand is it goes to the DPC and also to the department chair. And then, so if the department chair is going up for promotion, are they still required to review that? Or I thought, I don't know, whoever's going up for promotion doesn't have to sit on any of those. Could be mistaken.
The department chair would still review for their department.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or bits of advice? How many of you did a review online last year as part of the DPC? Maybe if you can talk a little bit about how you guys convened and met.
I have a question. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
hear
we
you.
can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I have a question. Sometimes I feel like the candidate either forgot to put some points, some activity, or whatever the reason, because in the past years, as a colleague, I participated in several activities with them. And I had a communication with them. So my question is, when we evaluate the candidate, do we have to be completely confined only with the portfolio, the files my colleagues provided here? Or can I use my experience? Sometimes my communication with him or her.
So you should only use what they present in the document.
Okay.
Their task is to make sure that they include enough evidence, right, that meets the requirements.
Which I just want to comment on that, Callie. I think we all have been in these meetings where that's what you're supposed to do, but it's almost impossible to do. And sometimes it's for the advantage of the person, and sometimes it's a disadvantage of the person. But yeah, because it's like, when you know, yeah, if they've done a lot of things and then, but it's not clear in the document. You know, I know there, you know, there's definitely been times when people are like, well, no, they did all these things, they didn't have it in here, and it's not super clear. Yeah, so it's such a fine line. It's difficult, I think, to yeah, to say you can only use a document. I guess I just don't think that's always what's done, but I guess that's what you have to try to do at least, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you have prior knowledge, that, you know, that is obviously going to influence how
Yeah.
you perceive this person, but you should not include additional
Sure.
outside evidence.
Right,
The evidence.
in the, you're right up, yeah, okay.
Can you
No, it-
request though information? So if you see that the document doesn't have some stuff, can't every reviewing body request information from the candidate, and the candidate can go back and put that in? Isn't that part of the procedure? I don't see it happen that much, but you could do that,
Yeah,
couldn't you?
yeah, no, we've definitely done that.
There is, would have to go look at what the process is for the online. I actually think that you would request that through the chancellor's office. Like you would not make that request. You would not contact the applicant yourself. But we can
Yeah,
get clarification.
correct, but you can request through,
Right.
there's a process for requesting. So if you
Yeah.
feel that the applicant's application has gaps in it, the reviewing body can request, there is a process for requesting that you get that information to fill in some of those gaps.
Just to reiterate, I know I see a couple of hands, but really importantly, you never communicate with the candidate or even really the department chair for information. It all really has to go through the chancellor's office if you're on DPC. I don't know who raised their hand first, but I see Julie.
So I was just going to say, for department chairs, it can be frustrating to have the opposite happen, where you're reading about somebody saying, I've done all of this, I've done all this, I've done all this, and you have personal knowledge that there wasn't follow through. But I guess my question to you is, I've heard, especially in tenure, that they're really counting on department chairs to do some screening, but if we're bound to only using the document, it's kind of an unfair expectation of us. Am I being clear?
I think department chair has to comment if what is written in there wasn't true, then that is a very important note. So, I mean, I mean, that's my view.
Yeah,
If
but I
someone
think,
writes, drove a crane and put the roof on the building, and they don't know how to, then you say, well, that's, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but that didn't happen.
well, I'm talking more about, I'm on this committee, I serve on this committee, I serve on this committee, but that person only showed up to one of them. But I think the contract really binds us to not being able to focus on anything but what is written in that document. So I guess this is my way of giving a heads up to admin that not to expect us to say something if what is
How
claimed is
can
not
that
accurate.
be?
Well, I also think that if, that the onus is on them to provide evidence of that, right? And if you know something and they wrote something and there's no evidence of the outcome, right? That's how you can perceive, what they wrote. So if they said that they're on 5 committees and that, they only showed up to 1 committee, when you write your letter, you're gonna exclude to be scathing, but you can say something like, there's no evidence that there were significant contributions or outcomes from this particular experience.
Okay, that helps.
I think Anne has her hand up.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is like, you can't add stuff that's not in there. Because I've had that experience being on a TPRC, and DPC added things that wasn't in the document, and then the DC added negative things that weren't in the document, and big mess. But it's got to be in the document. But if it's in the document, like Kelly said, and it's not what it appears to be, and that, as long as it's in the document, I think our role as a DPC and a DC is to validate or not validate. So I think you can comment on that. You just can't pull stuff that's not in there. You know, like, and even on a TPRC, that's why we have folks from the campus there that helps people not on campus to kind of validate, is that really true, you know? And we can kind of say, yeah, that kind of is, or I don't know, I never see them at this meeting, or they don't seem very active at campus. So you can't bring in stuff that's not in the document, even though you might know that. It's my take.
I think Debashish has a question.
So when you're validating this, how do you minimize your latent bias that we all have against somebody or the other? You call it validation, but you're spewing out your latent bias and including that in your validation.
I think you look for evidence.
Yeah.
And if it's not there, it's not there.
It has to be in the document, but did they do a good job explaining?
And so you focus on the document and the evidence, right?
Right.
And you minimize all this validation that you do outside the scope of that what is written in the document.
Correct. Correct. And usually if they haven't showed up for committees or haven't really done those things, or we all make ourselves try to sound great, in that document, probably not going to have evidence, or they're not going to have outcomes anyway. Maybe you point that out, of course, somebody might not. It's really a negative, which hopefully it's not. That doesn't happen that often. You might point that out for the next reviewer that yes, they're on this committee, but didn't see any outcomes, right? So yeah, we have to all be careful of our bias. You have to be like a jury, not their friend or not their friend. Which is hard to do sometimes.
It's the evidence, I think, that's key, and what people include. So when you're on a committee, if you flip me to a agenda, that is not evidence to me of your work on a committee, just because you have an agenda. So come on, what are you doing on the committee? What's your purpose for being there, and what was your contribution as a member? And you should have evidence of that. And it's looking at that and really understanding and being thoughtful about what you provide. I think that's really, really important. Having a huge appendix and pushing you to everything, I think, is irritating, but being able to highlight what you've done best in this that's what they're looking for. So you have to be very thoughtful about it. I think that's the key for me anyways.
Thank you. I see Sally and then Julie.
Yeah, some of this I think has kind of already been said now, but I think, one thing, if it's like a contract renewal and as a DPC, of course, then, if you feel like they didn't include things they should have in the document, or they included things in there that weren't really supported or something like that, then I think it's important that the DPC goes back to those individuals later. We do have that role to come back and, talk to them about it to help them for the next document. But then, of course, if you're at tenure or something, or promotion, then, it's, that would be after the fact. So it's a little more tricky at that point. But otherwise, yeah, I definitely think, looking at the evidence, and if they don't have it, something to support it, requesting that is the way to go.
Julie and then Whitney.
I was going to say, for folks that are new to this process, one thing that changes at the tenure level is they don't see the recommendations, they don't see the comments. So you can't assume that because you wrote something in your letter that the candidate knows that. So if you see the same issue come up the next year or the next 4 years or whatever, it may be because they didn't know.
Wait, just to clarify, the candidates do see the DC letter and the DPC letter. They also actually, when you're submitting, they actually will see your letter as soon as the DPC and the DC are finished submitting.
Oh, it's the TPRC letter they don't see.
Is that new, Laura?
Yeah, because I don't remember them.
That never used to be.
We never
So-
saw
got to
that.
see-
So
I
there
never saw
was,
my
oh
letters.
boy, woo. So when, in the previous process, when we were paper version, I don't know if you folks remember, but you used to have to sit with your DC and read the DPC letter and the DC letter, and then sign a page saying, I have read it, we've gone over it.
No,
Never ever heard that.
not
tenure
at
and
tenure.
promotion,
Contract
yes.
renewal.
At contract renewal. not at-
Contract renewal, but not at
No,
Not at
That
tenure.
never happened in my experience, not for myself or anybody I was DPC on ever.
so, okay, well, now I can't remember whether it was contract renewal, but then currently, because we just checked with Sandra, in this current process, when you submit, if you're on a tenure or promotion, tenure and promotion, your candidate will see the DPC letter and they will see the DC letter. And that is part of the process that Sandra was saying was what was written before in this same process.
And they'll also see it immediately.
As soon as you hit submit at 2 a.m. in the morning.
They will see it and they can call you. We've gotten calls. So we know that it's immediate.
Do they see it with the contract renewal, or is this idea of reading it? Because I think it's a good idea, especially for contract renewal.
They do see it for the contract, for both.
Okay.
Maybe we just all been doing it wrong all this time.
No, when I remember applying for tenure and them telling us, if you don't hear anything, that's good news. You shouldn't
Yeah.
hear anything. So that's what they used to tell us. So I'd be like, I haven't heard anything. Good news, good news. I haven't heard anything. Good news. Okay. That's
Okay,
what
Whitney has a question.
Hi, everyone. So I have a two-part question. I was a TPRC chair last year, and it was all online. So we ran into a little, I'm hearing myself echo. We ran into a little snafu where the voting, I thought I had launched it in a not confidential way, and I didn't. So luckily, one of our TPRC members had like just kind of a generic Google form that didn't collect email addresses. So we were able to use that. So I'm wondering, I just wanted to get some advice, now that all of the submissions are online, what platforms have you used to do this confidential voting for the TPRC? And my second part was for the DPC with the new guidelines. I don't think we included this in our humanities write-up, but does the voting have to be confidential for DPC? I know it has to be for TPRC, but what about DPC?
When we went to the meeting a couple weeks ago, they said yes.
Yes, the DPC has to be confidential now.
That's what they said at the system meeting, but somebody might want to check the UPA rules.
Okay. Thank you. And has anyone used anything other than Google Forms to collect votes?
We did Survey Monkey.
Yeah, we did Survey Monkey for one of the TPRCs.
Okay,
I've used that as well.
thank you.
Any other questions, tips? Manao.
Hi, being formerly active with UPA, I believe the DPCs should be confidential, but typically in our DPC type of voting, we're having conversations about really how to help this candidate or support the candidate or trying to be objective or what have you. So if it's a confidentiality issue, just do it confidentially.
It's actually in the contract, this is what it says. Written department or division personnel committee procedures shall at a minimum provide for a secret ballot voting at all final votes.
Yes. But in my DPCs that I've been, it wasn't secret because we were continuously having discussions is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, you know what? We've actually had some, what is that? I wouldn't say complaints, but concerns that from DPC members that they weren't offered confidentiality. So I think that it's something important to have agreement on if you're not, going to do it confidentially, but everybody should agree to that. But it does really say very clearly here that it should be confidential.
I agree, Kahele. Thank you.
Well, I just put in the chat the timeline so that you can see when you're deep. I mean, it shows you anyway when you do the submissions, but just so you know the time frame by which your DPCs and DC recommendations have to go in. Any other questions, comments?
I had a question. In the past, before we redid our DPC procedures, the DPC for the departments I was aware of really saw their role as supporting the candidate rather than evaluating the candidate. And I'm wondering if we can have sort of a definition of what the role should be from the eyes of our deans.
I think through contract renewal, the idea is to be supportive in that you give them constructive criticism and, guidance. I think when you get to the tenure, the point of tenure, you are meant to evaluate.
I like that analogy, Kahele, because I think we all try to be supportive. I think that's the role of a DPC, but there's only so much niceness and coaching you can do. And if people don't, like if you say certain things and you said it in the letter, some people may or may not do it. And then it really turns into being evaluative. You might do that your first contract renewal and your second. Then when it comes to tenure, you're really going to scratch your head and say, gosh, I know we said that several times, and then it turns into truly an evaluation. So I think it's evaluative.
Yeah, I think it's evaluative too. And I think our job is as colleagues, not the DPC, as colleagues in a department, our job is to support each other to get us through tenure and then on to promotion. And we do that by sharing committee work, by just being good colleagues to one another. And that's where the support comes in. Like we're all supporting each other, but the DPC, and even when it convenes at that point, it's doing so for one purpose, and that is to evaluate the candidate at that point in time. But that doesn't mean the candidate hasn't had support all along the way. They should have, and that support, I think, it's a department thing. I mean, it's a college thing, but it really is departments because of the shared responsibility.
Yeah, and I feel like the DPC responsibility changes a little bit with this new way of doing it. I think it's kind of a shame that we're the ones that have been out of compliance all this time, because when I've spoken to people on other campuses, they really like the way we were doing it. But obviously we have to change it. Because it used to be, right, you were on a DPC with a person for their whole 5 years. So you had the opportunity to coach them and, help them through. But now it's more of, especially right now, since the DPCs were just formed for the people who are going this year, kind of miss out on the contract renewals of the people who you're now on a DPC for as they're going for tenure and promotion. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a mindset shift for those of us that were on DPCs the way we used to do them.
Yeah, I just put that similar information in chat because the advice somebody might have been given along the way might not have been the same advice that now that you are the DPC member would have given. So we can't make an assumption about them ignoring feedback. And I think most departments have DPCs changing yearly or every other year or something. So there's not going to be that consistency for us to have expectations about.
So there's a question from Sally. Are the DPCs going to be able to pass on letters from past DPCs for same person? You mean this year? Because
I feel like that's one of those, usually candidates would typically include them themselves in the appendix. That's been our best practice, but I don't think that's required. That probably is something we'd have to ask to the chancellor's office. I can't imagine we can just freely ask that, but I don't know, we can get clarification.
Yeah, just, it seems like because we're not following them, like we were more for, it'd be nice then for the DPCs, the new DPC to kind of know what was talked about before. So if you are talking about the same thing again, yeah, it would be nice to know.
I know that question was asked at the applicant in the applicant session, and I think Laura made the same statement that they should include it themselves, especially if they're addressing issues that were identified at that point.
I think it used to be recommended as part of your appendix that you would have a little section that included the letter from your prior evaluation from the prior year. Well, of course, not once you get to promotion level, because you don't see those letters anymore, right? So, but through contract renewal.
They're saying now they will see those letters after contract renewal.
I put a question in the chat, it kind of moved up, but I was asking about voting outcomes and what happens when it's a split vote, because I've only been on committees where it was unanimously yes, they were pretty easy. So what happens if, I know we have odd numbers, 3 and 5 for DPC and TPRC, so I'm assuming it's just majority rules, or how does that work?
You just report it that way as so many yes and so many no.
You can also choose if you're want the members not in agreement can choose, they can actually put their own letter forward as well.
Mm-hmm.
So so sometimes it's so split, or often, or there's one, it doesn't happen that much, but I have seen it happen. And it is an option for the, for there to come have 2 letters.
Right.
Okay, so like if it's a 3-2 vote, yes, 3, no, 2, then we would recommend yes, but the no's can put a separate letter through.
And Whitney, you know what I would say? If that happens, then we would stop at that point and get advisement from the system too, just to make sure that we're doing it correctly.
Okay.
Something that I've done in that is when there was a split decision, we'd have our vote like kind of maybe midway through the meeting. And if there was a split decision, then of course we didn't know who voted what, but then we'd talk about it again. And in most cases, that would usually convince the people to make it unanimous. So just having an initial vote, discuss it, and then maybe having a final vote, then you might get a better idea.
Thank you, Mike. So I'm just confirming it doesn't have to be unanimous to put forth the recommendation.
I think I'm saying if it gets to that, I would recommend doing what Mike did. I think that that's probably the most common thing to do. And then if you guys cannot agree, then we would look at what options there are.
Okay. Thank you.
It really doesn't happen that often, get to that point, but there are rare occasions where you see it happen.
Yeah, well, like everyone was talking about, sometimes your personal bias comes into play, you know, like you can't, even though you're supposed to only look at the document, you can't completely separate out your experiences with the person. Or
I know for me in past groups, what we did is we normally, before we even discuss, we vote first, you know, and then we have a discussion. So if there's maybe like a 3-2 vote, you know, then we discuss and then we have a revote, you know. So prior to any discussion happening, we usually have a vote first.
I think Paul has a question.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everybody. So I'm just curious, how often, if you were to kind of put this into like percentages, like you know, people are denied their contract renewals or their tenure and promotion or promotion, like how often does this, is this pretty rare or is it happening kind of all the time?
It happens every year.
Thank you.
Don't let that depress you though. It's not like they are doing it on a bell curve where some people have to fail or be, you know, not make it. It really is up to you. And it really is showing who you are and providing evidence of that. And I don't know any DPC or TPRC that convenes that doesn't want there to be a positive outcome. You know what I mean? We do, really do. And when you see it go bad, like they're not able to articulate what the slides, like the evidence and the conversation or discussion that Kaheli and Laura showed on those first couple slides, it's sad. And there isn't anyone who doesn't feel that. That's why you want to support the candidate on the front end going in and make sure everybody has that and that they're able to articulate their case, because it doesn't come naturally to everybody. So it's important to kind of spend a little bit of time there for candidates.
Mahalo, Christine. Anne has a question.
Well, it's not a question, it's a comment, Paul. Just my experience, like Christine said, we tend to want to have a positive outcome. What I would say from kind of maybe some experiences in the past where we, you know, we wanted so badly to have a positive outcome and we allowed a positive outcome, it wasn't a good idea. And so if it's not positive, and they also brought in somebody from, I think it was Leeward, like, you know, human resources or some kind of expert. And I remember him saying, rip off the Band-Aid. So, you know, contract renewal, you know, sometimes we would let people, well, try again. And then at tenure, you don't give them tenure. It would have been better to rip that Band-Aid earlier. I think you can kind of, because your job is to be a teacher. But they're not a good, I mean, if they're not improving, or they're just not any good at all, or they're not really doing their job, or there's real red flags, you know. And we have those. We have had, you know, some people love them, but some people really hate them. It's you as students. So student reviews is what I'm talking about, especially if early part, because that's our job, is not committees, it's teaching. Sometimes it's better to rip that Band-Aid off. That's what I would say in my, experience is, it's hard. And, when we didn't do it, I think it was a bad outcome for the college, actually. So do as I say, not as I have done. Thank you.
Mahalo, Anne. Julie and then Sally.
Hi, folks, back again. Thanks, Anne. I like actually what you said. The ripping the Band-Aid is super real. It's tough when you're on TPRCs and the applicant is from Maui, and you kind of feel that maybe your colleague's own DPC didn't really review their document. And I've seen that where, it's like their philosophy was weak, or they overstated stuff that didn't even happen because you were on the same committee. You see what I'm saying? So like, you have to be real with that. You can't let people act as if they did something and they really didn't do that. And it's embarrassing when it comes to the TPRC and who was on that DPC, right? And those things are kind of like overstated. So I'm just saying, we can't sugarcoat things and make it seem like he or she, like, even if their writing may not be the best, I think it's so important to help them to really understand the depth of what's expected on that professional side. Because I'm telling you, if you know what that looks like, it's more shame when you hear your other colleagues from other campuses, from a TPRC, kind of like be on target with what that expectation is, and you're kind of feeling embarrassed because now that's your colleague on Maui whose document kind of doesn't look so good. So in my opinion, as a DPC member, you better be reading that person's document. And I sometimes feel that because we like them, we might just say, I'm not going to read them. And so I'm just saying, I've been in that position on a TPRC, and there were C4s and C5s on that committee, and I'm just feeling like, oh my gosh, what the heck, So it's a professional thing, and it's a reflection on Maui College, and I want all our colleagues to try and pass, and not look silly on a TPRC when the other campuses are like pinpointing all these little things that you probably wouldn't, you would have had you had the opportunity to help that person, you would have tried to say something. So that's my point. Thanks.
Mahalo, Julie. We have Sally.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and I think that obviously we want to help these people, the people who are trying to go forward, but also coming back to what does this mean for our students? What does it mean for our program? What does it mean for us as a college? What we're representing. And I think that's why it's so important when people are doing the contract renewals, so before they get to tenure, to really spend some time with them. And it's hard, especially, a lot, you maybe really like the person, but have some real issues with, some of the ways that they're approaching their classes or students. And I think maybe even your very first DPC meeting with them to say, look, we're going to be, we're going to be real with you, or, you're going to get some criticism, and just, don't take it personally. We're trying to help you. We want you to be successful. We want your students to be successful, and just kind of give them that from day one, so that they, they're kind of expecting it, and you kind of laid the groundwork of, what your job is as a DPC, and that you are trying to help them. I remember my DPC actually many, many years ago, like 25 or something. And I remember, there was some things in the very first year that one member in particular, kind of called me in, and we talked about some stuff. And, it was, I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, kind of, scared and feeling, badly about it, but at the same time, it really, I think, helped me. I mean, it made me think about some things I hadn't, and I think, I appreciated the fact that they did that, because they did say, hey, I'm not trying to, I want you to succeed. I'm just feeling like this is something you need to be aware of. I think doing that and doing that early in the contract renewal stage is so important, so that by the time you get hopefully up to tenure or other promotions, and if you're a person that's going through it, then, ask your DPC. If you're not getting it from them, maybe you need to ask them like, hey, what do you see? What can I do, differently or better, and ask them so that you are proactive yourself on that.
Mahalo nui, Sally. Great. You guys all said that better than we ever could have. Mahalo nui. Do we have any other questions or comments? I think in the end, right? When we give somebody tenure, right, we're saying that, we believe that they will continue to contribute to our campus in the ways that we expect, right? So, and that's how I always think of it, the expectations are high. Everybody in this room, right? There's a lot that goes into running the college, and we need people who are going to participate in that and participate well. So I think, and with that being said, everybody brings something different to the table. It doesn't have to be the same contribution, right? But they have to be able to show their value, and make us believe that will be continued into the future. Laura?
Oh, can I say one thing?
Sure.
Oh, it's just something I've learned recently, being on TPRCs, but it'll also translate to DPCs, to always remember to what rank the person is applying for. We have different responsibilities at different ranks, right? So a person who's going for a contract renewal, as many of you have already said today, they're only teaching. That is their sole responsibility, really. And we want to help them. When they're applying for tenure, they're mostly teaching, but tenure also comes with a promotion. So they should also be exhibiting, right, those next levels and so on and so forth. And so that was hard for me. My first TPRC of the next rank, that, when I was able to be, once I got my promotion and then I was able to be on that next rank, that was hard for me the first time, to remember that you're looking for some different things. Obviously, we're teaching also. That's always really, really important, but we just have to remember that as well. So be really familiar with those.
Yeah, and Kahele answered Whitney's question, but yeah, those that decide not to go up for promotion, there is a 5-year review process. So that's a separate process that we share deadlines and we can have another meeting about. But with that, mahalo everybody. Have a wonderful weekend and rest of your Friday.